caster, having somebody with skills of the 9th century. She was, according to the prior in Dunstable, placed in front of the altar rail, and you are standing on that spot. And those are the original windows. These ones have been repainted. These ones have never been repainted. You can still see some of the staining in them. That's the original glass looking down on you that was looking down on Eleanor's body. They were built in 1250. And Edward's best pal, another one of these people that the king tried to make the Archbishop of Canterbury, and instead ended up being Chancellor, and looked after the kingdom when he was on the Crusades, and helped arrange the burials where he wasn't on. So Edward didn't go to, for example, he wasn't in Dunstable. He went on to St. Albans, but his buddy looked after Robert. And Robert had built a castle with these same windows, 4 and 6 and 4 and 6 in his castle, after having been here. And the castle was built long after this in 1250. And we don't know why it's like that, because according to the Ely Glass Museum, we're the only church in the world that had 6-sided windows at all. And one of them doubles in size on solstice. You have down there Purgatory, your old Saxon church. That's where the pagan stuff is in most churches. Now, walking up to the rail, you have gone up the stairs. Remember, they put the stairs in afterwards. The altar used to be down there, and everyone's happy. The Normans bring it up here, and they put in steps, so you're ascending to heaven. Bigger the church, more steps. And the churches were mostly built, so they had to dig out or build up the whole church in order to put these steps in. Then they put the gate, so that you couldn't even look at the altar. People think of the rood screens as being a screen, but they were solid from here down. So you were not able to see the altar. You had to purify yourself through the prayers, which we still have in the first quarter of the service. Is basically preparing you to be able to approach the altar. And then you came up here on your knees and you stopped here. Any pagan stuff up to here is usually done by the contractors. They put up some sort of, we have Lincoln imps, things like that. The misery chords, of course. We don't have them because these were done by Union Straw. But you look under here, and we're plain and simple because Edward the Confessor was pure, simple, and plain. That's why our pillars are so plain. You look at how plain our medieval rood screen. Everything is about Edward. It's just the Treshams who came and put some money in there to suck up to James. But everything was very, very plain and simple. For a king's church, it's very simple. It's a saint's church. This is supposed to be plain and simple. I've never found a church that has pagan objects from this point on. You know, this is 1316. It says William Glover of, D-E, right? Gaddington, there you go. Addington. So he's of Geddington, the carver. And it's made me, which is very Saxon, I think, in 1360, and the raised seats, Patamente, in 1369 AD. And then, God rest his soul, amen. So, we're standing in a place where people would have been struck down, burst into flames. I mean, this is sanctuary, not because you couldn't arrest someone near an altar, it's because they should have burst into flames if they weren't innocent, right? So, and then how come we have, and they came in here, they smashed all the windows, they smashed all the statues. Another thing to look for, statues don't match the plinths. How in the idolatry of things affixed to the wall, you either cut the brasses, which we have, and they cut all the noses off. But that's a May Queen. Now we have lots of other explanations for it. Considering the fact this place has 14 ceremonies for May, not just the May bread. And our main ceremonies for the kids, which are the Victorian ones, are on the 23rd of May by tradition, because I think we wanted to have the Victorian when they brought it back when it was no longer suppressed. The fake Victorian ones on the 23rd, so the real ones still should be done on the 1st. So you have it from prehistory is set with May Queen. And we have what appears to be a May Queen in the corner. Now, if she was all by herself, that would be fine. The problem is we're also worshiping water gods, right? Well, he's like a green man, except, instead of plants, you've got water flowing from him. The Egyptologists have told us he's a dead ringer for, what is his name? Can't remember any, for Egyptian water god. He is also the South Americans have identified him as the South American pagan water god. Whatever he is, he's primitive. He should not be here. He is in style pre-Roman, because of course the Romans, they have chests, they're water gods, right? Because they're riding the waves. Doesn't matter, there's Triton, Neptune, Poseidon, they all have chests where they're rising on the waves. Yeah. This guy is in theory pre-Roman. And in style, they all agree it's between 2,000 to 3,000 years old. He should be anywhere other than behind the altar. So then you say, okay, what's on the other side? Is that another one of him? No, that would be too simple for this church. We have that. And we have a primary source for that. Eleanor of Castile wrote a letter in which she said that she was building a memorial to her beloved dwarf jester of Geddington. And that's a 13th century dwarf in jester's costume with a mask on. So, village story is, they were looking for something of Eleanor's to show this was her church. She spent more time in this church than any other, but she didn't have to because of royal duties. And this was her church, and they wanted something of hers, but everything in the Queen's Chapel had been destroyed. Except, because 1369, good, time passed, her death. So, however, they did find something they said was much loved. In medieval times, they were very, 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 very serious about their religion. And no church on this planet has got a joke or a jester in the high altar. You don't put it there, even if it's the Queen's. So, you have three objects. What bugs me, this one, if you're going for symmetry, doesn't match. Three objects here, any one of which would be unique in any church in Europe. This is one of his windows. This is said, one of the neat things about it is, he's put in an eye of Horus at the top, which you can only see when you're in purgatory. And when you walk in, it becomes the eye of God, the all-seeing eye. Then, as I said, Adam and Eve are the same height, the same branches, and that's every painting from medieval times, from the Renaissance right up until the 1950s, because then we started doing parodies, that has them with the same branch, right, not with two branches. They both have their own fruit very clearly. He's already taken a bite out of his. And they're the same height exactly on the same footing. Normally she's up or around. Yeah. They're equal. At the beginning of time, men and women were equal. That's a huge statement. They're not better or worse than each other. They're both responsible for the origin of sin. Mary is holding the fruit of good and evil. Now she's supposed to be perfect. The Catholic Church went to such extremes to make her perfect because they want to worship a woman, but they don't want her to be a woman. They want something that women can aspire to. 4th century, that she rose into heaven like Christ did, intactus. This is to make her the vessel of Christ, not a human being. That is a woman holding the fruit of good and evil. And that's what she's teaching that child. She's teaching the frailty of mankind, which is the point of Christ being born to a human couple, that he's supposed to know all this stuff, being brought up by this golden statue that they created of Mary. But it's against the teachings of the church. Windows like flags. You start in the middle, and you go left, right, left, right. If you're odd numbers, if it's even, it's the far right most important. So the center is the most important, and you've got Christ. And Mary would be over here, but they put him in there because it's a Catholic-style window. So over here is the precursor to Christ, John the Baptist. Then you come over here, and you should have Peter or Paul as the first apostle, depending on what diocese you're in. And we're in Peterborough, so it should be Peter. Instead, they have Mary. Now, not only Mary there, you notice she's wearing her scarlet cloak. Say that she's a prostitute. Well, no, she's got ermine all the way down. And that's not the prostitute's oil she has in her hand. He's changed it around just ever so slightly. And all through her dress are various royalist symbols. Then he's put Peter lower than her. And that's important because you look, they're exactly in alignment. And yet Peter is clearly below her looking at her back. He has, technically speaking, made her the first apostle. And she should be. Is it up until the 4th century, many churches worshipped her as the first apostle. And why not? She's the first person to know of Christ's ascension, first person to see Christ ascended, and the first person to tell anyone. That's the first disciple. Had she been a man, great artist of the time. You have Pugin, you have Comper, and you have Gilbert Scott. These are the three top architects at the time. And this is one of his last great neo-Gothic windows. In fact, it probably is the last great neo-Gothic window he did. This was done 50 years later. And the difference is so great. English Heritage calls this the history of glass in England. It's still feminist because the women are standing on their own. They have no men above them, and they're not kneeling and being told what to do. And it's pre-war still. He's put on top, instead of having men above the women, he's put the sun, the moon, the illuminated star, which are all female symbols. And everything he did, he signed. Remember, this is a guy like Pugin who designs churches from ceiling to floor. He did St. Mary's in Wellingborough, everything in it. He did the carvings, he did the statues, he designed all the in several churches. I mean, he did our choir stalls, but that was his first job, which was very simple. But he did this window, and everything he does, he carves, chisels, or paints a strawberry. So if you go to Westminster Abbey, because he did the windows there, in the north aisle, for example, it's a green strawberry because the backdrop color is green.
Okay.
And it's always in the far right-hand corner. But this one, he thought he was going to die. This is his last great window, and he didn't think he'd finish it. And he carved it, he put the symbol in the middle. However, he lived to be 90. He finished this window, and the signature is left in the middle. So it's the only one, very appropriate for this place, to be assigned in the wrong spot. Everyone else, you have the strawberry in this corner, leaf, berry, flower. That's the signature. You don't have to remember Comper's name, just look for the strawberry. Apparently his father was the vicar of Aberdeen. He used to go out fresh fruit to the poor children. See, our vicar, for example, said that this guy, he's supposed to be a priest, and he may be, a priest who died giving sacrament in the 9th century. And then they built this in the 13th century, like St. Cuthbert, brought back. And I said, St. Cuthbert was a one-off. I mean, they were trying to unite the church in the north and the south, plus the different aspects of the religion that he represented that was willing to accept both. So they brought him back for a very specific reason. They didn't bring back all sorts of odds and ends in the 13th century to honor 9th century saints. And they didn't do it in a so Saxon. But he does have what appears to be a Saxon tonsure. And he has a Saxon helmet in the corner there. So our vicar thought this was where the holy water was, and the pilgrims would come up and they'd touch his hands and his face. And that's why they're worn down. And I said, well, a couple of problems. One, of the 600 of these that still exist, there's only a handful that have got a water stream. And every one of them has got a bowl for the space for a bowl to go in. You don't just pour water onto concrete. Maybe a bowl could fit in there, but it doesn't look like it was designed for it. But it doesn't say it's impossible, just improbable. And also, that's the left-hand side. Why would you be touching the left hand rather than the right? Unless it's in some sort of cornice or in another location. And he definitely looks like he's been moved. And yet the Victorians, who raised this roof, widened all the windows, filled in the door that used to be here, did the floors all over with an under-the-floor heating system. So every aspect of this church has changed while they're there, and yet they didn't move him because this is the original floor, and this is Victorian. Why did the Victorians stop here? So I want a ground-penetrating radar here, thing that stopped them at this point. But I may be asking the wrong question. That's a problem with archaeology. You tend to ask the wrong question and then you go off in the wrong direction. Anyways, he's more than 7 feet tall, if his legs are allowed to come out of the chasuble. It's so badly done, this chasuble, with 2 lines and 1 line, that I thought something was covering it. They had a screen here, and that's not the original screen. A few churches have got a James I one. They tore them down to the Reformation, right? They tore them all down, burned them, whatever. And we had, we believe, over 2,000 of them were destroyed. Of the 100 or so left, there's only about 20 that are considered not over-repaired. Everybody's got a Victorian one because Victorians came in, raised all the arches, and threw out the stuff that didn't fit into the skip. So some homes, great homes, have got a screen, or they've got pews and stuff thrown out by the Victorians. And Gilbert Scott loved this stuff. We are the only church, all 3 of the major root screens still in use.